Thank you. So, as I indicated the last time I hosted this press conference, the entire country is now glued to what is taking place at the convention center, that is the national recount. And many people are still very concerned about their daily livelihood and their ability to survive and prosper in this new environment with the COVID virus. So I want to speak first about what is taking place at the National Convention Center and about that activity. Now, for us to understand what is really taking place there, we need for a moment to take away the ambient noise, the side chatter, the apnu lies. And if we do all of these things, then there are a few things that are very evident now that about 15% of the boxes have been counted. 369 boxes as of yesterday. There are two things that are very, very clear from this recount. One is that the statements of poll for Region 4 that were uploaded by the People's Progressive Party in March and have been in the public domain since then, that their recount and their statement of recount are all matching those statements of poll. And for all 369 boxes that were counted, the statement of recount statements of recount have all matched the statements of poll. There have been some small adjustments. For example, you will see, because now in the recount, they're having a second look at rejected ballots, spoiled ballots, etc. So you may see minor changes like by 1 or 2 votes up or down for either party. For example, of the 369 boxes that were counted, 350 have already been tabulated in the 4 regions. And those show that the People's Progressive Party gained 24 votes. APNU lost 5 votes from those 350 boxes that have been tabulated. So we have gained 24 votes. For example, if you look at the statement of poll for Craig Good Success, box 4071, you would see that we're up in the statement of recount, where the figure differs from the statement of poll by 5 votes, and that is APNU lost 5 votes and we gained 5 votes there because 5 votes were placed in the envelope and counted for, that is PPP's vote, counted for APNU. So outside of those minor variations, the statements of poll, we come back to the fact. The fact is that the statements of recount have all matched the statements of poll for the 15% or 369 boxes already recounted. So that gives credibility to the statements of poll, particularly in Region 4, the ones that we put up since March. Now, you'd recall until now, APNU has refused to make their statements of poll public. Up to today, Patterson was asked about this, and he refused. But they claim that the statements of recount are matching their statements of poll, but they refused to release their statements of poll. So that's the first point. The second point is that Mingo's declaration today and the CEO report to the commission cannot be held in abeyance any longer because Mingo's declaration has been totally discredited. It could form absolutely no basis for a future report of any CEO or for the declaration of the results. So in just 8 days of recount exercise, with just less than 100 boxes counted for Region 4, a pattern has been established, supported by evidence, that Mingo's declaration was fraudulent and false, and it cannot be the basis for declaring the results of the election. So that has been clearly established. So even today, Patterson wants the declaration in his interview be done not on the basis of the recount figure that we all wanted, but he wants GECOM to go back to Mingo's declaration in the face of all this evidence and in the face of all this fraud to declare the results on that basis. This is up to today. He did an interview, and that's what they want. So what was their results? You have witnessed in the public domain, because the numbers have been circulated widely for all 25 boxes disaggregated. And these show that in those 25 boxes in Region 4, that the figure for APNU was inflated by 1,874 votes by Mingo, just in 25 boxes. And that in those 25 boxes, he reduced the votes for the PPP by 262 votes. So what if we were to do an analysis of this situation? Now, clearly, Mingo, from when you compare the statements of poll that we put up and his fraudulent declaration, he increased APNU's votes overall for Region 4 by 19,000, just over 19,000 votes, 19,107. And in his fraudulent declaration, he reduced the PPP's votes by 3,653 votes. So a net difference of 22,763 or 23,000 votes. That is the fraudulent amount given to APNU in Region 4 by Mingo. So if you have 25 boxes, and 25 boxes, the first 25 that we release, when you add the 1,874 votes that he inflated for APNU and the 262 votes that he took away from the PPP, that's just over 2,100 votes. So it just takes now, if you extrapolate, you just need to inflate, or he needed only to inflate around 275 boxes to come up with the 23,000 votes. 275 boxes. So in Region 4, we have 879 boxes, and they just needed Mingo using the same, if we were to extrapolate or to say the same pattern would hold that took place in the 25 boxes that were proven to be inflated for APNU. Mingo needed only to inflate 275 boxes, or the figures. So that is a pattern that we're seeing, we're looking at. But what is quite clear now is that not only that Mingo's declaration for APNU is a fraudulent one, and it confirms what every international organization has said, that the results for Region 4 declared by Mingo, those results are not credible. And we in the People's Progressive Party, we proved they were not credible by uploading our statements of poll, which have all so far been verified as accurate when the recount was done. So the two big lessons very early they started from the convention center have been, one, that the statements of poll are all matching the statements of recount. The statements of recount are all matching statements of poll. And two, it's clearly established now that Mingo's declaration was fraudulent and therefore cannot be used as the basis for any declaration. We can give you more details about this at some point in time, because we've done a series of analyses here. So now that we've seen this trend, APNU knew about this. And that is why they knew once the recount started, the recount would reveal, once it's done transparently, the recount would reveal the plot to rig the elections. And that is why they were so vociferous against the recount. They did everything they could, from going to court, from placing objections using their commissioners at GECOM to avoid the recount, all the time claiming that it was the PPP who didn't want the recount, falsely claiming that, and falsely claiming that we were going to go to the court to block the recount. They did not want this recount. And so the recount has now revealed what took place. So APNU is in a very bad position, APNU AFC now. So they had to change their game plan. And this is what you have witnessed taking place in the last few weeks since the recount started. So they know now that the elections, once the recount is completed and the elections are declared on the basis of the recounted the statements of recount, that they would lose the elections. So their entire narrative has shifted now to one of discrediting the elections and the process. And their actions, as you have seen, are all intent on discrediting the process. So then they can argue, but they will not succeed. That these allegations were so many that you have to have fresh elections. That is what we predicted they wanted from the beginning. And now we're seeing it playing out before our very eyes. So what I've seen some of the allegations. So let's talk a bit about some of these allegations. Now, APNU made a press release on Sunday, May 10th. And they said the recount process has uncovered, among other things, countless instances of dead persons being recorded as voting exclusively in PPP strongholds. 2, countless instances of persons who have long migrated from Guyana and who were not in Guyana on election day before being recorded as voting. 3, countless instances of persons who did not uplift their ID cards from GECOM. 4, countless instances of unsigned oaths of identity in PPP strongholds. And it goes on, missing numerous instances of missing poll books, numerous instances of votes for other parties being recorded for the PPPC. In fact, you just saw that they got 5 of our votes, and we've picked up 24 votes in 350 boxes, and they've lost 5 votes because it was the other way around. Numerous instances of ballots cast for the APNU AFC coalition deemed as being spoiled. Well, those are rechecked now, and you see what has emerged. So imagine in this, they listed 7 reasons, and 4 started with countless and 3 numerous. And let me say to you, this is the kind of adjective and the kind of, you start a statement by countless and numerous when you don't have specifics. Because there's not been not one single instance of proven fraud by any APNU operative at GECOM. And 369 boxes have been recounted. They have made wild allegations, objecting to people, calling out their names, people who are alive and well, people who have never migrated, people, a whole range of widespread allegations just to discredit, to get these in an observation report. And then they insisted that the observation report, which they have a copy of, should be read out by GECOM, thinking that we'll be duped in that process to think that these are real. Well, finally, GECOM has said to them and to the supervisors, you record these as allegations. There's been not a shred of evidence, not a shred of evidence to support many of the allegations. In fact, the allegations made by APNU. But you hear them, countless instances, numerous. This is the language that they use when you don't have evidence. So the AFC, they said the AFC in its Sunday column in the Kaichor News they repeated the lies. So they now said James Bond and Shara Duncan had pointed to a situation in District 1 where almost 600 persons who had died or migrated were recorded as having voted. This is a figment of their imagination. No 600 persons who died or migrated have been recorded as having voted. That's a lie. And it comes from 2 liars, Shara Duncan and James Bond, who are mortally afraid because of their wrongdoings being exposed when the government changes. They're mortally afraid. And so this is a total lie. But they elevated it now in the AFC column in the Kaichor News to 600 persons in Region 1 have voted without this. They haven't provided evidence, a single bit scrap of evidence. In fact, they have typed up a list and said that people left the country. These are people who left the country. Now, people may have gone on a vacation. They didn't look at people who were coming back. You go abroad, they look at the departure records. I'm not even sure they're looking at records or just typing up these things. And somebody may have come back to vote. In a couple of instances, they gave a few names. But you would recall that APNU had at every one of these stations an polling agent. And you would also know, those of you who have voted, that when you go into the polling place, the rigid tests you have to go through. Each party agent has a list with your picture on it. And then you have to present an identity document or take an oath, and then run the gauntlet. You have to go get the ballot, you ink your finger, and then in the evening, the count is also witnessed by the parties. And they all signed on. In every instance, APNU signed on to the statements of poll. So now suddenly they're elevating the rumors. So this is what they're thriving on, rumors now. None of this is voted. Where they came to a specific on the Linden Soosdike Highway, this is again in the AFC column, at the Yarrowcabra Primary School, coalition representatives pointed to the massive cheating and fraudulent behavior of the PPP to win the crucial region or District 4. So we never claim we won District 4. We're claiming that that's the first falsehood there. Their SOP showed the coalition obtaining 41 votes and 59 for them. The PPP, lo and behold, as widely expected, the recount showed a whopping difference of 119 votes for the government. Now, I don't know which government voted. I thought party contested elections, not a government. So here I have the two statements of poll for that very same box. And they match the one that the PPP put up on its website, and it's still there. And you can see that it was put up since March. And the IT people can see the timestamp on it. You would see that it matches exactly this statement of recount. That's a lie, a blatant lie. So in the one instance where they sought to prove the case, they were found to be lying. They have not proven a single case of a dead person voting. They have not proven a single case of anyone migrating voting. Not a single one. And for them, it's numerous cases or countless. Those are pure allegations. Then again in this document, it spreads another rumor that the PPP was being exposed after it had a secret meeting with the IT specialists. Now, this matter has been discredited by GECOM itself. The PRO dealt with it, but long after it was dealt with conclusively that there was no such meeting, and that meeting took place in the engagements took place in the dome in the presence of everyone else and through questions that were asked. They continue to repeat the lies, and this is in the AFC column. So clearly, their objective is to using their surrogates and all of the others, the James Bond, Christopher Jones, and the Shara Duncans, who are very much afraid of a change in government because all their perks and the rape of the treasury, everything will disappear, and a lot of their the illegal activities that they've been engaged in would unravel. They're very desperate, and they're now spreading these lies. Only an extremely stupid person without no faculty to read and understand himself would buy into this nonsense. Only because in the face of all that they had been claiming before, in the face of the fact that they had a polling agent at every polling place, and in the face of now what is coming out of the recount, that Mingo's declaration is fraudulent, only an extremely stupid, gullible person would buy into the lies and the narrative. And sometimes I look at their faces. They look dejected, they're demoralized because they know they lost the elections. It's the last pathetic fight that they're putting up, trying to cast doubts on an election that they themselves had gone to a great extent to claim that they won and to prove that these elections were properly done. And so I think they keep forgetting what they have said before. So let me remind you about the coalition's efforts to prove that they won the elections before, and the elections were free, fair, and credible. Now, as you know, they spent a lot of money and hired a firm in Washington to lobby on their behalf. And so what they did, they created a dossier as the tool for the lobbying, that this dossier will be sent to congressmen and to members of the executive and to people, senators and others. So that Granger said, and you know, that he never hired the company. And although they said they were working for the government of Guyana, and then that was changed. I think a report was made to the US government about that they fraudulently filed in the FARA. But let's look at their own document that they prepared. APNU AFC prepared a document, a dossier. They then had this company file this document with the US government, the Justice Department. So this document is part of the official record filed with the US government through the Justice Department. So this document, the dossier, I've taken the relevant parts from it. Every page has a stamp on it, and it says received by NSD FARA Registration Unit, and it says when, on the 3rd of March 2020 at 6:19 p.m. That means this dossier was filed with the US government on that date, and it's part of their official records. So the very, very beginning of the dossier, this is what they sought to prove. This is maybe about page 3 of the dossier. They said, and I want to read this out so that you can follow. I don't want to, maybe this part I will not read out because you can follow this. On the free chronology of events, please go to this document on the chronology of events surrounding Guyana's 2020 general and regional elections, and you will see under the heading Free and Fair Elections, they said that the elections were free and fair, and that it was first stated at a press conference by the chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission, who stated that the commission delivered free, fair, and credible elections. So this is Claudette Singh saying that the elections were free, fair, and credible on March 3rd, 2020, the day after the elections. So she was speaking about voting, the day of voting. They then said in the second paragraph, the announcement was followed by a joint statement from the heads of mission of the U.S. Embassy and the British High Commission, who congratulated the people of Guyana for a successful and peaceful election day. The chairman of the Private Sector Commission, Captain Gerald Govaya, gave similar sentiments, stating that he was satisfied that the voting process was fair, free, and credible. On March 4th, this was before the count, the CARICOM Elections Observation Mission in a preliminary statement said that the observers were satisfied that the conduct of the poll was free, fair, and transparent, adding that the people of Guyana should be proud of themselves and commended GECOM for the peaceful conduct of the poll. The briefing was attended by chiefs and members of other regional and international observation missions, including the Carter Center, the OAS, the Commonwealth, and the European Union. So here at the very beginning of their dossier, which they filed with the U.S. government, part of the official record now that they sent to congressmen, etc., they said elections were free and fair. And here is evidence of it, that the polling day activities were all free and fair, and you have evidence from the statements that I just read. So that's the first part of the dossier. Then, if you can then go to another part of the dossier, just following that part, which speaks, and it's titled Perspectives of the Issues Arising from Guyana March 2nd, 2020 Elections. Remember, I'm reading from an APNU document. This is APNU document. So they asked the first question, were the Guyana elections fraudulent? And then they sought to answer that question. First, was the voting process fraudulent? That's under the heading, were the Guyana elections fraudulent? The first question, was the voting process fraudulent? And this is what they said here. After polls closed, the following comments were made by observer missions, the Carter Center. The center's 41 observers conducted 220 observations in polling stations across all 10 regions, in addition to observing the advanced voting for disciplined forces that took place on February 21st. Carter Center observers reported that voting and counting processes were largely well organized and peaceful, and assessed the implementation of voting procedures as positive, with only occasional inadequacies. GECOM utilized its strong base of electoral expertise to conduct well-managed voting day operations. The voting and counting processes were generally well prepared and logistically sound. So they quoted the Carter Center. That's what the Carter Center said. They then, in an effort to prove that the voting process was not fraudulent, APNU in its own documents quoted the Organization of American States Observer Mission Head. They said, commended the people of, the same Bruce Goldin, commended the people of Guyana on their strong democratic commitment, which he said was reflected in their peaceful and enthusiastic participation in the polls. They quoted the EU Observer Mission, who described the voting as well managed, with everyone able to express their franchise. They then quoted the Commonwealth Observer Mission, which commended the Elections Commission on its hosting of an efficient election process on March 2nd. Polling conducted in an orderly, transparent, and largely peaceful environment. Polling stations were generally well organized and prepared for the polls and opened promptly. Staff appeared to be well trained, and we commend them for their professionalism and their diligence. That's the Commonwealth Observer Group. They then went on to quote the CARICOM observation mission, which said that they are satisfied that the conduct of the poll was free, fair, and transparent. Said that the people of Guyana should be proud of themselves, and the mission salutes the Guyana Elections Commission and the citizens of the country for the peaceful conduct of the poll. So these are all statements that they put in their plan to prove, statements from the observers group, to prove the question that they asked, which was, first, was the voting process fraudulent? So what is their conclusion now? This is APNU AFC conclusion in their own document. It says here, and this is bold. If you go to see them, it's bold. So the various comments from the observer missions conveyed that the voting process in the elections was well managed, peaceful, proceeded largely without incident, and was free, fair, and transparent. That is what APNU is saying. It is therefore reasonable to conclude then that the voting process was not fraudulent. I repeat that APNU said in the document that they filed with the US government, it is therefore reasonable to conclude then that the voting process was not fraudulent. So that was on March 3rd, March 31st, 2020. Today, that narrative has changed. This is when they are claiming, like in this document, they claim they won the elections. Today, when they know they're losing the elections, suddenly they're claiming that voting day procedures were not credible. And therefore, they want to use that to discredit the process. The people who have gone to this great extent to prove that the process was perfect and that all the observers supported them in their contention that the voting was done transparently. And they concluded that they felt that it was done transparently. Suddenly now they changed the narrative because they have lost. How could you believe anyone? Is this not transparent what they're trying to do? This is their own document. I don't know how they're going to get out of this with the US government or with anyone for that matter when they file this themselves. And so this is something that you should examine clearly. Nobody should pay any serious attention to all of this propaganda that comes from them now. This is their face-saving way to tell the supporters that they lied to them and they lied to the country and they were attempting to rig the elections. Now the entire narrative has changed to the elections. Oh, they had countless and numerous irregularities, but they can't prove a single case so far. So the game plan must have been one at the beginning that they could have disrupted the recount and fall back to Mingo's declaration. But clearly they can't go back to Mingo's declaration, although Patterson wants that now, because GECOM, and they should release Mingo's spreadsheet to show how he came up with 136,000 votes in Region 4 for APNU AFC. And so he should justify his numbers because it's the spreadsheet that they use to calculate the total. And so clearly that should be in the public domain. They should make that public. This may not happen because GECOM never made the SOPs public because they are part of that plan. People like Roxanne Myers and all of them, and many others in the APNU AFC camp. So, so they would have a hard time doing that, releasing this. So you can go back. That part of the game plan is already out the window. You cannot fall back to Mingo's declaration now. So even if they disrupt the process or try to stop the process there, which they're using all sorts of excuses, now I hear they want a total shutdown of the country under the COVID rules. This is all intended to delay the inevitable, because if you shut it down, you can't go back to Mingo's fraudulent declarations. Secondly, to try to discredit. So they had to go to option 2. And the option 2 is to try to discredit the process and argue for new elections. And we knew about that even before. But clearly that's not going to work. This is a recount. Once the recount is done, you have to tabulate the numbers, and the numbers will say who won the elections. And we believe that because we put up the statements of poll that we got from the actual count on election night, and they're matching the SORs, that the new government will be the People's Progressive Party. That they would show definitively that the People's Progressive Party won the elections. So their only hope is to argue for fresh elections. That's what they keep saying. But how are you going to do that? You can't annul these elections because APNU makes some false claims about countless and numerous and can't be proven. Anything of that nature, if they have the evidence, they can prove it in the court through an elections petition. They can file their elections petition. And actually, I think Mr. Craig was honest enough to say, since election night, they've been preparing an elections petition because they knew on election night that they lost the elections. And that's when they initiated this crude rigging plan and stopped the use of the SOPs to calculate the votes in Region 4 and then triggered this fraudulent fake spreadsheet that they helped to produce with Mingo. And so they knew from that night that they lost, and they started. Mr. Craig said just a few days ago that they started preparing the elections petition since that night. So they will be free to file the elections petition in court. But this game plan will not work. So I saw recently that they hired back the company, now signed by Patterson and Harman, at $40,000 a month for a whole year. That's a lot of money. They used to complain about Mercury. That's several times more than we ever paid Mercury. So that's a huge amount of money. It's over maybe about $500,000 US. And so I don't know where this money is coming from. But you would recall that that document was filed sometime in April, before the recount. So now that the recount has exposed the lies in the dossier, the company must be having a hard time going to the State Department or Capitol Hill or anywhere else to carry out that narrative about them winning the elections, which they put there, and that Mingo's declaration was a solid basis on which to declare the overall result of the elections. So I wouldn't want to be in the place of the company that they hired. And but they hired that company in the long-term contract in April. Now, what happened since they hired that company? Because if the purpose of the company was to stave off any focus on Guyana, they failed miserably, because we have had in just yesterday, a couple of days ago, a bipartisan statement with 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans from the House of Representatives speaking about the recount process and saying that it must be credible. It must be credible as the basis for moving forward. And they have that bipartisan group, both Democrats and Republicans in the House, have called on Granger to allow the return of the Carter Center and the IRI. Now, you would recall that they blocked the Carter Center and the IRR from coming back. But they are allowing everybody to come into the country. And when I say everybody, I mean it. All the oil companies have flights coming in here. People from all around the world can come in. And we have Guyanese stranded in many parts of the world who want to come home. They can apply the same protocol that they are applying to some of the people coming back. Not coming back, but coming to work for the oil companies, to our own people, to allow them to come home. They're stranded everywhere. And use the same COVID protocols to see that they must comply with them, that the workers for the oil companies are using. But it seems as though they have preferences over Guyanese and over the international observers too, when this is the most important exercise that we are engaged in now. So it is an abuse of that, and they have denied, in spite of this call from the congressmen, 6 congressmen representing both parties, to allow the Carter Center and the IRI to return, they have continued to deny the permission for them to do so. Secondly, we also saw just yesterday a very rare and very powerful statement coming out from the Senate. Now, again, bipartisan, with both Democrats and Republicans supporting it, saying that they will hold Granger to his promise to respect the results of the recount, and secondly, that the recount must be credible. And they too called on Granger to allow the observers to return. So this is very, very high-level interest in the recount. The very, very high-level interest from the U.S. government, not just because you've heard from the executive, and the executive at the senior level, Mr. Pompeo, Secretary of State, has made clear about certain actions, and that if there is an illegality, an illegal government is sworn in, there'll be sanctions. And now the executive is bolstered by statements from the House of Representatives and the Senate, bipartisan statements, to say that the recount must be done credibly. Now, people keep asking, does that mean there is no sanction? And the sanctions, and I keep saying, I've been saying all along, they have an opportunity to do the right thing. The country and these individuals can avoid sanctions if they allow the process to work. The process is free, fair, credible. The recount is done without them tampering, interfering with it. The declaration is made transparently on the basis of tabulation of the recount data, and a government is legitimately sworn in. Then there's no talk about personal sanctions or sanctions on the country. And this was confirmed, but that option is always there should they tamper with the process. And so they must know that there are consequences for tampering with the process now. And I think that perspective was reinforced when some Guyanese who've been trying to misrepresent what the PPP stands for, right? and they went to the State Department, and they spoke with, I think, the director of the Caribbean Affairs Department, Mrs. Catherine Duhom. And she made it clear this question was raised. And the question was, if you know that there are established processes, why not let them be completed before talk of sanctions? And this was her response. When I was speaking about specific voting irregularities that we noted and called out, we were responding to attempts to put in place a government on the basis of that count. Had that happened, it would have been a foregone conclusion and the process would have ended. That is why we needed to speak out when we did, in hopes to be able to deter this from happening, deter it from happening. We agreed that the process was not concluded and needed to be, but there were some actions that were being taken that indicated an effort to bring the process to a premature conclusion. You remember them pushing GECOM for the declaration and 3 times setting up swearing-in parties for Granger, calling out their supporters. So pretty much on the basis, so she said that indicated an effort to bring the process to a premature conclusion on the basis of illegitimate results. That is why sanctions became a topic at this time. As long as we don't head that route again and people respect the democratic process from here on out, hopefully we'll be able to avoid considering them at all. And that is precisely what we're saying. We don't want, if the process is allowed to be concluded to the conclusion without them tampering with the process or trying to thwart the democratic will of the people, then there's no need for this. But should they try to mess with the process, because that means the first option spoken about here would be in place. The process would have ended, and their attempt to swear in an illegal, illegitimate government would end badly for all of them. And Ms. Duhom said, if we do have to consider sanctions, there are a number of tools available to the U.S. government, and they range from visa restrictions to any number of financial measures. So we have seen solid stand for democracy on the part of all the branches of the U.S. government, the executive branch as well as the legislative branch, both houses, and it's a bipartisan effort. And in the statement from the House of Representatives, you even have members of the Congressional Black Caucus. So attempts to paint this as intervention into Guyanese politics, etc., will fail. This is an attempt to stand up for free and fair elections and democracy. And this is a value shared by the entire U.S. government and by both sides of the House, both sides, both Democrats and Republicans. So I'm not even going to go through APNU's attempt and all of the whisper campaigns about who supports them and who doesn't support them. This is, you've seen this week yourself where many senators stand and many congressmen stand. I'm hoping that the government, the de facto government, and the COVID task force would stop playing politics and give the international observers the permission to come here on the same basis, to return on the same basis they allowed the CARICOM team to come in, and the same basis that they allowed the CARICOM team to come in. We think everyone should demand this of Granger, because he is again missing in all of this. So we've also seen a presentation at the OAS by the council, by the head of the observer mission, Mr. Bruce Golding, a former Prime Minister of Jamaica. And Mr. Golding presented a report because he came as head of the OAS Elections Observation Mission in Guyana. And the mission is made up of 17 international observers from 13 countries. So he was speaking on behalf of the international observers from these 13 countries, not in his own right alone. So we have here a former prime minister and the head of an observer group saying something that shook APNU. But he didn't say anything about APNU. So he spoke about the elections, and APNU claims they had nothing to do with the elections, that GECOM is an independent body. GECOM is an independent body, therefore Mingo declaration is independently done. APNU should have nothing to do with it. They should not even defend it. GECOM should defend it or not defend it, disown it, not APNU. But Mr. Golding said, I have never seen a more transparent effort to alter the results of an election. It takes an extraordinary courageous mind to present documents with fictitious numbers when there is such a sturdy paper trail. And there was a sturdy paper trail. All the parties had their SOPs. APNU refused. That is the reason APNU refused to make public its SOPs. Because had it made public, you would have seen that Mingo's declaration is fictitious. So what Mr. Golden saw, the Prime Minister Golden, others saw too. Every single observer group said the same thing. Every single observer group and all the diplomatic missions here in Guyana from the Western countries said the same thing. They saw it before their very eyes. All of the political parties saw the exact same thing. APNU was the only one who didn't see this. They're happy with Mingo's declaration. The only party, APNU and AFC, these parties, they're the only one happy. So when Golding was speaking about this, he was speaking about Mingo's declaration. But suddenly, Harman comes in, and Harman says some negative things about Golding. And they are now defending GECOM, although they claim, and Mingo's fraudulent declaration, although they claim, and Granger likes to say this, we have no part in that. That's their business. But Harman weighs in now. And Harman then says about Bruce Golding is Jagdeo's friend. And let me say something about Bruce Golding. Now, I'd been president for a while, and I work with several prime ministers around the Caribbean. And I have a good relationship with almost all of them up to today. But Bruce Golding and people like Owen Otter and many of the others who have left, even Patrick Manning and stuff like that, these are decent people who will never stand for rigging. And they saw what took place. They saw what took place. These are decent. This has nothing to do with friendship. What he saw, the entire OAS observation mission saw. All 17 of them from the 13 countries. And all of the European Union observers saw. And all the observers from the Commonwealth saw. They saw it. So criticizing Bruce Golding and saying he's Jagdeo's friend, therefore, so as though he was saying something that was not factual or that others weren't saying. Everybody has said this. But they may not have been so blunt, but this is exactly what everyone wants to say. And we've been saying this. And we've said even further that APNU AFC is part of the plot. That's why Harman had to jump in to defend, because he heads the rigging cabal in the executive. That's why he's hanging on so much. And now God helps us that he is now with the COVID task force and wants to shut down the country. And imagine yesterday at GECOM, they were trying to get the COVID task force to visit to look at additional workstations. They had other things to do. They will even try to block the recount from being accelerated. But I'll deal with that in a moment. So let me say something. Bruce Golding has more credibility, decency, honesty than this entire APNU apparatus, all the cabinet members put together. All of them put together. They're not thieves. These are thieves of elections. They're defending blatant thievery, shamelessly doing so, going out and defending things that are indefensible. Thievery they're defending. And therefore, Bruce Golding has more credibility than all of them. Harman, especially Harman. Harman shouldn't even speak about a person like Bruce Golding, who was a former prime minister and a distinguished person. But Harman has been in the gutter and remains in the gutter all the time, trying to hang on to power when they lost the elections and putting this country and people through this trauma. So they now have a new conspiracy. That's why for the first week I stayed away from the convention center, although I was in touch a lot with our people, but I've been working heavily on making sure that the international community is aware of what's going on here and others. And because we have to, and the whole country should be involved in this exercise, all the decent people of the country, exposing their lies, calling them out, pointing this out to our contacts, the international community everywhere about the shift in narrative now and the purpose of that, what their game plan is. So we must do that, because I know from the time I show up there, there's always a conspiracy theory. So yesterday, APNU AFC took the time, as soon as I showed up there, they now said, they issued a statement. The APNU AFC notes that Mr. Golding and People's Progressive Party General Secretary Bharat Jagdeo appeared in tandem before the media. Mr. Golding virtually and Mr. Jagdeo at the conference center, at the Chung Conference Center. Mr. Golding's virtually and Mr. Jagdeo at the Otachung Convention Center. It appears as if this was coordinated and prearranged to deliver statements which were strikingly similar in content and style. I didn't deliver a statement. I just spoke ad lib, and I had a hard time to do so because I had to use the mask, and it's very uncomfortable speaking, but there was no prepared statement. No prepared statement whatsoever that I delivered. But from the time I appeared there, it's as though there is some conspiracy. It's pure nonsense. Imagine these thieves and conspirators. They don't trust anyone else because they judge them by their own standards. Now, there was no coordination between Bruce Golding and I. What I spoke of yesterday is what I've been saying for a long while, that we know that the PPP won the elections. Our statements of poll, the statements of recount are matching the statements of poll. We are proving that Mingo had made fraudulent declarations, and that there are numerous attempts to slow down the process in the convention center by APNU's activists, and they're resisting any attempt by these countless objections, frivolous, not just frivolous, by making these unsubstantiated allegations and insisting that they be put in the observation report and then insisting that GECOM should read them. That is what's slowing down the process and going through sometimes you lose an hour of the recount just for something inconsequential. And that is why with 10 working stations there so far, the average number of boxes being done per day is just over 4. And so that needs to be accelerated because you recall, first, Lowenfield and GECOM put forward a 156 days plan, and APNU was supporting this. They want to drag this out. We would like to see it accelerated without compromising the checking of the essential things and checking the ballots carefully. That is what we want. We have nothing to hide. They said we're trying to hide as though we have anything to hide. They're the ones who have a lot to hide. But how could making these wild, unsubstantiated allegations be part of the process? It's being used to slow things down. So that's what I said yesterday, and I repeat it. I just want to say that we saw GECOM, the commission, making taking the position that they want to speed up the recount, and therefore we appreciate that. That was one of our concerns because this is going on too long. The chair had indicated 25 days. We wanted 10 days and more counting stations. Had we had those, we probably would have been much advanced, double the amount of boxes done already, and we could have met that deadline. That is what we had asked for. We had asked for 20 counting stations. Now, the Chronicle was part of the PR machinery. This is put out, PPP concedes recount timeline too short. The PPP concedes the recount timeline too short. We didn't say the recount timeline is too short. This is Chronicles, this rag newspaper headline, which is funded by taxpayers. We want the timeline to be maintained, but more counting stations and other measures taken in place, which could be quota system, increasing the working hours, etc., so we can complete the count within the timeline. So that is, you can't expect Chronicle, DPI, or NCN to be fair. In fact, they have chosen, some of the reporters I see there are more political activists of the APNU. They don't come there to listen to any thing from DPI and from Chronicle and from NCN. Many of them come there just to carry out. In fact, I look at some of their faces, and many of them from the state media, they're practically angry when you're giving an explanation. They're trying to defend the indefensible. Even APNU is not making up some of these stupid things that you're being asked. because it doesn't make sense. But I guess we'd have to live with that until the government changes. But this is the purpose of the Chronicle and DPI, etc. These should right now, which are funded by taxpayers, giving balanced headlines, allowing both sides to speak and give a balanced headline, write balanced stories, and the people they send out there now to cover this are more party activists than anyone else. So don't expect any change there. They will be part of APNU's propaganda machinery to the end. But the end is coming soon. And they're saying that the scrutiny of ballots continue to unnerve the PPP. Do we look unnerved? That is Chronicle headline again. Scrutiny of ballots continue to unnerve PPP. Do we look unnerved? You look, who is unnerved now? Look at Patterson stuttering, can't give a proper interview. They're hiding. Basil Williams saying, oh, the elections were free and fair. We won them. And I have my statements of claim. He doesn't know what to say. Another one goes out and says something totally different. One says, oh, the elections are credible, but the scrutiny can make them more credible. It is total confusion in that camp, and Patterson keeps blundering his way, and Harman keeps continue to lie from the distance, and Granger is missing in all of this. He doesn't even take a position to maintain his own credibility, because they're shattering everything that he may have stood for once. So let me just say that we hope that the timeline, as GECOM itself said, that they could review these. We will keep fighting the lies being told from some of these social commentators who have no credibility, and from the state media. The state media now is the propaganda arm of the PNC and the AFC. They would lie to you, openly lie to you. They're engaged in character assassination. We'll continue to fight and expose them, because they should be balanced and fair, and especially those who are using taxpayers' money. And we'll keep watching carefully so that there's no abuse of the COVID task force and other things to slow down the process, or they don't undermine it. We await the Commission's decision on how it will accelerate the process. These are some of the issues that I wanted to address today. So we keep being vigilant there. I want to thank all of those volunteers. There are hundreds of volunteers now who are coming out of their homes, assisting. In spite of many, against all odds, they're here, and I want to thank them. There are a number of people who've been helping out. I want to openly thank them. I want to say also that this total lockdown is something that needs to be debated properly to see if it is the most, the ideal, the optimal path for Guyana, given that many people are already suffering. They're running out of money, many running out of food, they have lost employment, and you can't continue forever like this. We have to come up with some other credible plan to deal with this situation. And right now, the APNU has no plan whatsoever. So we are not fully bought into this total lockdown, what it would mean. That not a single person will come out from their homes or anything of that nature. Already we have a curfew. We have a lot of people wearing masks. We have emphasized social distancing. We have asked people to stay at home if they don't have to come out for any important purpose. Those are important issues. But what does a total lockdown mean? That you can't come out at all, you can't See, some people can't work, they can't, even if they observe the strictest protocol. I don't understand this, and therefore we'd be paying close attention to this matter. What is the position? There are some questions. What is the position of the PPPC should the APNU FC ignore the results of the recount? Well, if they ignore them, then GECOM, they can ignore anything. It is GECOM that has an obligation to use the data to declare the elections. And the chair has ordered a recount, the GECOM. The only basis for declaring the results now could be the results of the recount. And therefore, we be vigilant. But I know APNU AFC will try to ignore the results of the recount. Now, once the chair makes the declaration or the commission makes the declaration, and in the view of most persons, legal specialists and everybody else, that's the only basis. The recount data is the only basis they can use now, particularly with Mingo's declaration discredited. Then APNU will be opposed to it, so they can go and file an election petition. How will the PPP respond for call for fresh elections? We have made that point clear. There can be no fresh elections now. You have to complete the process. We have not completed the process for these elections. That is going on now. So anytime, if you allow this to succeed, anytime a party doesn't win, they can come and make some spurious claims, etc., and then delay the process and call for fresh elections. And if you have fresh elections now, without reforms at GECOM to put in safeguards now against this happening ever again, how do we know that they're not going to do the same thing again? So we will never support the call for fresh elections, and I don't think the international community is supporting that too. Will the PPP pursue charges for people who participated in electoral fraud after it takes office? We have to look at this issue carefully. There are a few people that will have to answer. Mingo has to answer clearly what is going on. And by the way, I wonder where Mingo is. The media should try to track down Mingo. The media has to track down Mingo and find out what is his response to all of this and why doesn't he release his statement that he used. But clearly Mingo, and there are a couple, I know there are private criminal charges filed since March against Valder Lawrence and Mingo. And we will be interested in seeing how that goes because Valder Lawrence's signature is on the declaration made, the first declaration made by Mingo. We'd like to find out in court how her signature got on that declaration when she's not required to sign it. What happens if GECOM refuses to release its SOP? It has refused already, and we have to just continue with the SORs. This has happened already. This is not what happened if they refuse. They have refused. And that is why we keep calling on them and APNU to release their SOPs. If the recount order is not being followed fully, what is the response? So I see now, for example, when it says observers have to get a copy of the SORs, GECOM has changed that decision to not give the observers a copy of the SORs. And so, but that's in the order. So that matter has to come up at the commission level. We have raised these things about compliance with the order. And there may be needed some amendment of the order itself, because if there are additional workstations, I think 10 are mentioned in the order, you would have to amend the order itself. Is there a recourse to respond to the coalition's weaponizing of COVID-19? No, it's hard to, because they claim health. But you know the individuals who are there. The Reagan gang is central to that COVID task force. In fact, they've placed themselves in there because of perks and because they think they can weaponize it. But the biggest response we have in this regard is the public pressure and exposure, because right now you can't do anything else. I know a few people were probably contemplating the court. Somebody said to me that the Constitution doesn't allow, it's very specific, that it doesn't allow anyone or anybody to interfere with the GECOM. That is a constitutional body. So whether that goes to the task force or not, that may have to be explored, because now the task force, as I see it, is becoming a humbug to the speedy establishment of the new counting stations that I think the Commission has discussed and is more inclined to do. So we'd have to look at this, expose it. With COVID, Mr. Harmon promised support to vulnerable farmers, small business, and students more than 2 weeks ago. Till now, there's been none. Is there anything that can be done to help Guyanese who are out of work and children who are out of school? This is not, helping Guyanese is not a priority of this government. Hanging on to power, using all their energies, using our money to pay for lobbying firms to stay in power, although they lost the elections, stealing money now, including from that big project that they're doing by the convention center, not the convention center, the sanatorium by Linden. All of that's their priority, not helping people. If they had any interest in people, Granger would have ended this now. He should have seen enough by now. Imagine, Granger is not a stupid man. Granger is not a person who has not had some experience. He is here, he was a senior figure in the army, in many other places. And so by now, if he's interested, he should be embarrassed by all of this, by the exposure, and he could put an end to this quickly. He could end this rigging cabal being a humbug, an embarrassing apno on a daily basis. And he could put an end to some of the thugs that they're using, and total liars and people of questionable character like Sherrod Duncan and the others, to spread lies. Every lie that they get exposed on, and the public must do this, there is another nail in their coffin, because it just reinforces the lack of credibility that they have. So Harmon and the others, this is not their priority now. Their priority is to go online, use the state resources, spread lies, hoping that by some miracle they can hang on to their perks. This is their priority. Thank you very much.